Guys don't know how to multitask. That's not really our thing. And if you're talking to a guy and he's watching television, he's not really listening. And here's what a guy will do, at least I would do. Kathy would be talking to me, she'd be telling me some story, and I would say, looking at the television, ladies, I shouldn't tell you this, but let me tell you what means. Means I have no idea what you're saying because I'm not listening to you. That's what means. Just being honest. Isn't this vulnerable time? Isn't that what we're doing today? We're opening up.
Welcome to Church of the Rock from Winnipeg. Stay tuned to this week's thought-provoking message from Pastor Mark Hughes.
My message this morning is entitled, Whatever Floats Your Boat. Now, we all know that expression, right? It's sort of different strokes for different folks. You know, some people like this, some people like that. And we're going to be talking about it in terms of emotional love. Because when you look at love, different people give and receive love in different ways. And nobody has articulated this better than Dr. Gary Chapman, who wrote the book, The 5 Love Languages. How many of you have read this book or know of this book? Lots of you. It was written in 1997. It's sold over 5 million copies worldwide. It's in 38 different languages. And it has gone a long way to helping people understanding emotional love. It has gone a long way in actually saving marriages and relationships because it has helped us to understand one another. Now, the 5 love languages, as he calls them, are this. They are words of affirmation. They are quality time, acts of service, physical touch, and giving of, or receiving of gifts. And so what he says is, and they've discovered this clinically, is that people will express or receive love in one of those 5 or a combination of those 5 ways. What's fascinating, as you look into Scripture, you'll discover that those are the same 5 ways of loving in Scripture, and that's what we're going to look at today. I got a picture I want to show you of this Oprah program. How many of you remember Tom Cruise on Oprah? You remember this? Tom Cruise on Oprah, and he's jumping on the couch. Look at Oprah's face. You got to love it. She's seen it all, and she does not know what's going on here. And what had happened was he was in love with Katie Holmes, and he's jumping up on the couch going, I love her, I love her, I love her, I love her. Isn't that nice? Apparently, Katie Holmes had forgotten about, let's see, Mimi Rogers, Nicole Kidman, Penelope Cruz. Let me put it this way. Tom Cruise might be a top gun, but marrying him is risky business. Staying married to him, mission impossible. There might be a few good men out there, but he ain't one of them. In divorce court, we saw Katie Holmes going, show me the money! So there you go. And so infatuation or in love is not the same as love. And because infatuation in any relationship is not going to last, we're going to have to discover ways of expressing our love to one another in meaningful ways. And that's where the 5 love languages come in. Well, where we're going to look at this is we're going to look in John chapter 13. Now, if you have found it, it's a long chapter with dozens of verses. I'm not going to read the whole story, but what I'm going to do is read the beginning, I'm going to read the end, and I'm going to fill in the blanks for you. John chapter 13, verse 1 says, Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come, that he should depart from this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them until the end. And so it starts by saying he loved his own in this world. It was a reference to those that he lived with and walked with and his disciples. And it says he loved them until the very end. And we have this picture of him with his 12 disciples, including Judas, that he loved right till the very end, right till the moment that he betrayed him. Even though he knew he would be betrayed, he still loved this man. And so here's what happened. It's the last Passover that they shared together. In fact, it's the very last evening they ever shared together. And what he did was they rented the upper room. And in the upper room, they had what we call the Last Supper, or the Lord's Supper. He broke bread. He said, this is my body, which is broken for you. They shared the wine. He said, this is my blood, which was shed for you. And then after the meal, what he did was he took a towel around his neck and he kneeled down on his hands and knees in front of each one of these men with a basin, and he washed their feet. After he washed their feet, we see a picture of them lounging around, and they're talking and they're relating, and in that moment he reveals that there is a betrayer in the midst. Judas gets up and leaves the room. And so that's the story in a nutshell. I want to go to the end, and I want you to listen carefully to what he says at the end of this discourse. It's verse 34, and it says this: "A new commandment I give you, that you love one another, as I have loved you, that you love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Now he says this is a new commandment. Now we all remember the great commandment. The great commandment was this: to love God and to love your neighbor as who? As yourself. But that's not what he's telling them here. He says, I am telling you to love one another as I have loved you. And he says, if you can love one another the way I loved you, the world is going to look at you and they're going to know you're my disciples. They're going to know you're my followers because you love the way I loved you, which is a much higher love. See, loving your neighbor as yourself is okay, but a much higher form of love is to love one another as Jesus loved you. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through this story, and we're going to see if we can find the 5 love languages that are expressed. Now, the first one, as I said, was words of affirmation. One of the challenges we have with this is we often think of Jesus bawling his disciples out, which he did from time to time, right? Ye of little faith, get behind me, Satan. That's not something I'd want to hear from Jesus, by the way. But on occasion, he said those things. If you read through this passage, those are not the kinds of things he was saying. He was speaking with gentleness and kindness and affirming words of love to these men and talking and sharing his heart with them, because that's the kind of man that he was. And there are times in Jesus' life in the Gospels where I would say he was downright effusive in his praise of others. Do you remember the story when Peter figured out that he was the Christ, the Son of the living God? Do you remember what Jesus said to Peter? He said, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you." That's pretty high praise for Peter, a man who was always saying stupid things, a man who the only time his mouth was empty was when he was changing feet, right? And so we see this incredible praise for Peter. We see this moment with the centurion. Remember, he was the one who said, "Only say the word, my servant will be healed." And Jesus turned to this centurion and he said to him, "Such great faith I have not seen, not even in Israel." I want you to think of how high a praise that is. Jesus himself, the Son of God, told this man that he was expressing the greatest faith he had ever seen in any other human being, even in Israel. If Jesus told me he had never seen such great faith, I would never wear a hat again. My head would be so big, right? I mean, that is pretty significant praise. Mark Twain said this. He said, "I can go 2 months on one good compliment." Well, good for Mark Twain. Most of us can't. Most of us cannot last 2 months on one good compliment. I'll tell you something. The first thing that goes in a relationship, in a marriage, for example, a tired marriage, is words of affirmation. You see those marriages that have become stale and tired and worn out, and you don't see those words back and forth. You don't hear those endearing and loving and kind and wonderful words anymore. It's the first thing that goes, and then the relationship begins to spiral down like this. Let me tell you a story that happened this week. My 23-year-old daughter, single daughter, she's been reading books on relationships. And so she's been reading books on singleness and on marriage and on men. And so the other day she said to me, "So Dad, I've been reading this book about relationships and I finally figured men out." And I said, "Oh, really?" She says, "Yeah, oh, it was so good. They had a whole chapter on men and understanding men." And so I thought, I better write it down. So I've been taking notes. I said, "Well, good. Why don't you share with me? I want you to get your notes and share with me what you learned about men. I'm curious." She stuck her hand in her pocket and pulled out this Post-it note. This Post-it note. And she pulled out this Post-it note and she says, here they are. And I said, let me get this right. You wrote everything you know about men on a Post-it note? She said, well, it didn't take up the whole note. It's only about half full. I said, well, so tell me, what'd you learn? She says, well, there's only really 3 things. You've got to give them lots of compliments, affirm their strengths, and trust and encourage their decisions, she says. I said, Danica, those things are all practically the same thing. She says, I know. Isn't it great that men are so simple? To which I said, you know what? You've pretty much nailed it. I don't know what else you need to know. You know, I have women come to me all the time. They go, oh, Pastor Mark, I just don't understand my husband. I just want to know what he's thinking. Really? You want to know what he's thinking? I'll tell you what he's thinking. You know what your husband's thinking? Nothing. What makes you think he's thinking something? Just because he's staring off into space doesn't mean he's actually thinking. There's no emotional gymnastics going on up there. I'll tell you what he's thinking. He's wondering, what time does the hockey game start? Should I upgrade my iPhone? That's all he's thinking about. There's nothing profound going on there. The porch light's on, but there's nobody home. He just needs you to say, honey, you're awesome, and you've made his day, and he can get on with it. That's all you need to know. So the first thing is this. The first thing is words of affirmation. The second thing is quality time. I want you to think about Jesus, because if anybody was an expert at quality time, it was Jesus. I mean, he picked these 12 disciples, and he lived with them 3.5 years, day and night. They lived together, ate together, walked together, ministered together. He explained stuff to them. They shared their hearts. They spent an incredible amount of time together. And then, on his very last day, the very last day on earth, he spent the entire day, entire evening, and entire night praying together with his disciples. He chose his last day on earth to spend in an intense time of breaking bread and sharing and loving and being in this incredible quality time. Let me explain something about quality time. There is a difference between time and quality time. Just because you are sitting together in a room, that is not necessarily quality time. People who give people quality time, they're people that know how to understand how to actually relate in a very personal and intimate way. My wife, Kathy, her thing is quality time. I mean, she is Mrs. Quality Time. I'm not Mr. Quality Time, but she's Mrs. And if you ever have a conversation with Kathy, she locks on. She locks on, locks in, and we're done. And you will have her eye contact. The building could be burning down. There could be a tsunami, an earthquake. It doesn't matter. She's locked in, and she doesn't break eye contact. Until you're done, you've got her. Now, if we're in church, and I see her, and she's locked on to someone, I know I'm here for at least another half hour. So I have time to talk to probably 45 or 50 different people. You will get 30 to 50 seconds tops. That's all I'm giving you. I give time, not quality time. I give intense quality time. That's what I do. And I mean, this is just who she is. That's who her gift is. I mean, when our kids were little, she would sit on the bed or sit on the couch and she would read them stories for hours on end. And she would just relate to them and read to them. You know, Dr. Seuss, Berenstain Bears. Remember the Berenstain Bears and Little Critter? And she'd read these stories. Now, I would read the stories to the kids, but they didn't like it when I read them to them, because I gave all of the characters accents. Papa Bear in the Berenstain Bear, he had an East Indian accent. I am Papa Bear. And so I would do all these accents. Little Critter had a voice like this. I was just so mad. And so they said, why do you have to do those voices? Mom doesn't do those voices. Turns out I was entertaining myself, not them. So what happened is the kids eventually got too old to read them stories, so she started reading me stories. And so she was giving me quality time. So she said, oh, Mark, let me read you this article. And she'd read me 28 pages from an article or an entire chapter from a book. And so I had to learn strategies how to receive her love. See, here's the thing I need to tell you. You know, if guys don't know how to multitask. That's not really our thing. And if you're talking to a guy and he's watching television, he's not really listening. And here's what a guy will do, at least I would do. Kathy would be talking to me, she'd be telling me some story, and I would say, looking at the television, ladies, I shouldn't tell you this, but let me tell you what means. Means I have no idea what you're saying because I'm not listening to you. That's what means. Just being honest. Isn't this vulnerable time? Isn't that what we're doing today? We're opening up. So, I'm trying to give you some quality time here. All right. And so anyway, we're sitting in one day. I'm watching television. She's saying something. Not sure what she's saying. I'm saying, And then I hear, sort of out of the corner of my ear, if there's such a thing, I hear this, so what do you think? Do you think it's a good idea? And then I'm realizing I didn't actually hear what she said. And if I say I didn't say that, then she'll think I wasn't listening, which I'm not, which would be bad. So the best thing for me to do is to make up an answer. And so I said, yeah, I think that's a great idea. I agree with you. Really? We can do it? I said, sure. Not sure what I was agreeing to. So anyway, we took up the ballroom dancing. This is actually a true story. And we went ballroom dancing for the next 6 months, and I showed up dutifully because I love my wife and I will do anything she asks me to do if I don't know what she's asking me to do. And so we did a ballroom, and you say, Mark, how did you survive 6 months of ballroom dancing? Easy. I just pretended it was a competition. I pretended we were competing against the other couples there, and guess what? We were dominating. We dominated our class. That's how I got through that. So the first thing is words of affirmation. The second thing is quality time. And the third thing is acts of service. Now, this is an amazing part of this story because after dinner, what Jesus does is he dons a towel, brings out a basin, and he starts washing the feet of the 12 disciples. Now, you need to understand something. In Jesus' day, they had servants that washed feet. And the servant who washed the feet was the lowest of all the servants. Because the feet were filthy, they walked barefoot or on sandals, and they were full of dirt, and they were full of calluses and cracks, and the lowest servant would wash the feet. And so when Jesus bent down and began to wash their feet, Peter objects and says, no, you can't wash my feet. Jesus said, no, I am washing your feet. And he was embarrassed that Jesus, the master, was washing his feet, the disciples, but Jesus did this. And then when he was done, he said, now go and do likewise. Now, a lot of times we've misunderstood that. I believe that what he was doing was he was talking symbolically, not literally. Because in our culture, we don't actually wash feet. We don't do that. We don't have servants that do that. And every once in a while, somebody comes up with the idea of doing a foot washing service. Let me ask the question. How many of you have been to a foot washing service? Anybody in the room? Bunch of hands. I'm sorry to hear that. I've been to one. I hope I never have to go to another one. I mean, we were in this service, and all of a sudden, the next thing you know, we're doing a foot washing. We got randomly paired up with people. The guy I get, turns out, is ticklish, and he's giggling like a little girl all the way through. And I thought, if I'm going to wash his feet, I'm not just pouring water symbolically. I'm scrubbing the soles of his feet. I got a bar of soap, and I'm going to town on the bottom of his feet. He's giggling. I thought, there's something being missed in this picture here. See, here's what I think. I don't think that Jesus was telling us to wash one another's feet. I think what he was doing was he was telling us, and it's symbolic, for actually ministering to people in their physical needs, whatever their physical needs are, and in fact being willing to go down to the very lowest depths to serve another person, the most humble level to serve a person. I think that that's what he was saying. And I think as we look at our own lives, see, I mean, when I think of my wife, Kathy, she does not want me to wash her feet. But she'd be happy if I washed the dishes or the laundry or the bathroom or the floor or anything. If I washed something, she would be happy, right? Doesn't want me to, I mean, I can't even imagine that picture if I tried to wash her feet. That would be very unwelcome. But there's all kinds of things she would want me to do. And see, we need to understand this, that washing someone else's feet is washing or doing something that they have a need in. And so when we do something to serve another person where they, for whatever reason, and the example that Jesus gave us was him going and bowing down in the very lowest form of servanthood. Let me tell you a story about when my brother was dying and in the hospital. My brother was severely injured and severely sick. He had broken his neck. He was a partial quadriplegic. He was dying of cancer. He was in the hospital. I went up every night or every day to see him, and oftentimes had to do things, honestly, I would never do ordinarily and for another person. But you know what? When you love somebody, you do things for them. And I remember one particular day, it was probably just a week or a few days before he died, and he had, because of his paralysis, he only had partial control of his bowels. And he was in the bed, and my brother was a big man. He was 6'2", 240 pounds, and he wanted me to help him. Remember, he's mostly paralyzed, and he needed to get across the room to the washroom. And I tried to help this big hulk of a man. I only got him about halfway, and he landed on the floor, and he went on the floor, and it was a huge mess. And I remember there being on the floor with him and cleaning up this mess, and I remember how embarrassed he was. Like Peter. Peter didn't want Jesus to wash his feet. But you know what? In that moment, I actually wasn't embarrassed, because it was an opportunity for me to serve my dying brother in the very lowest form that one would serve another human being. And you see, eventually, every one of us will get to that place where we will need to serve someone or to be served by someone. Because, unless, you die instantly in your sleep, you'll probably die of old age in a hospital, and you'll probably lose your functions. And you know what? You're going to have people that are going to care enough about you that they're going to show their love for you by getting down and dirty and helping you with the very base needs of life. And it's part of God's economy and God's world that he would require us to love one another in that way. And when Jesus said after washing his feet, "Go and do likewise," that was the example that he was giving to his disciples. So the first thing is this. The first thing is words of affirmation. The second thing is quality time. The third thing is acts of service. And the fourth thing is physical touch. And one of the things you see about Jesus is his ability as a man to physically touch other people, including other men. And if you go read John 13, you will see this moment where Jesus is with his disciples. And I love the way John words it. John says, "And the disciple that Jesus loved was lying with his head on his bosom." Now, John describes himself, you gotta love this, as the disciple Jesus loves. Anytime he refers to himself in his gospel, that's him. The disciple Jesus loved, I don't know about the other 11 guys, but the one he loved was lying there with his head on his bosom. Now, I know you look at that story and you go, wow, that's some real physicality between two men. Now, you need to understand, in Jesus' day and age, that was not inappropriate physical contact. Men were not macho like they are today. You know how we're in this macho world, you punch a guy in the shoulder, "Hey, bud, how you doing?" Or as far as you're willing to go, the fist pump, dude. And, we've shown a lot of connection there physically by doing that. And not so in most of the world, even today. I remember years ago when I traveled to India, I had this translator. His name was Joel. And let me tell you what India is like. In India, it's not appropriate to show public displays of affection with your wife or with the opposite sex. And so the men will actually walk down the street holding hands with each other. And it's a completely heterosexual thing. There's no other message in this. They just like each other, and so they hold hands, and sometimes you'll see three abreast walking down the street holding hands. They just love each other. They're just showing affection, and it's completely appropriate in that culture. So I'm there for 3 weeks. I've got a translator. His name is Joel. After a few days or a week, we've become close, and we're good friends, and we're walking down the street one day. Yeah, you got it. He reaches over and takes my hand, wants to hold my hand as we're walking down the street. Now, I pulled my hand away and I said, "Joel, let me get something straight here with you, buddy. I like you and everything, but I am not holding your hand. I've got a reputation to maintain, even on this side of the world." And so I would not, under any circumstance, hold his hand, and that was just that. Now, 5 years later, I'm in Argentina. In Argentina, the men kiss. So you know, the first week, and men are kissing me, and men are hugging me. And then I thought to myself, hey, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. I thought, you know, if these guys want to kiss, I'll kiss. And so I'm kissing guys like they're going out of style. And you know, I just thought, what are you going to do? You can't fight this. But you know, we live in this culture where we're just not very physical, and physical touch is immensely important. We all have this need of human touch. We all have that, and you can't live without it. Don't underestimate the power of physical touch. Many of you know my mother sitting right over there. She's a hugger. And I've seen her go up and give these huge hugs to complete strangers and says, it's so good to see you. And then she'll come up to me and say, who was that exactly? I said, I have no idea who that was. She said, well, he really needed a hug. And you know what? He probably did need a hug. And the people who express love with physical touch, they're easy to spot. They're the ones that come into the sanctuary here holding hands all the way through worship. They're holding hands. Then they sit down, and during the message, she's rubbing the back of his head, up and down, up and down. That would drive me completely crazy if somebody was rubbing my head like I'm some sort of doll, you know. You know, Kathy and I, we've tried it a few times. We've walked down the street holding hands. We last about 30 seconds. We let go and both rub our hands on our pants. We have a king-size bed, so we will have no physical contact whatsoever during the night. We have 3 children, but it was basically a miracle. Some of you are just getting that. Hey, real quick, let's wrap this up. You've got words of affirmation, you've got quality time, you've got acts of service, you've got physical touch, and the last and the final thing is this: you've got the giving and the receiving of gifts. And there's some people that just love to give, and they give gifts, and you know, you've seen those people. Jesus was one of those people. And he was about to give them the greatest gift that anybody could ever have, the gift of eternal life, was what he was setting up to do. He's willing to go and pay the ultimate price and die on the cross for their sins. And all through Jesus' life, he gave gifts, gifts of healings, gifts of miracles, gifts of salvation. That's who he was, an incredibly generous person with who he was and what he had. Let me close with one final story here today, and it's the story of Jack Benny. How many of you remember Jack Benny, the comedian? Most of you maybe aren't old enough, but some of you do. And Jack Benny had the television show for years and years, and he had a running gag about how cheap he was and how he was this just unbelievable cheapskate. If you look at this picture, he had this big vault. Jack Benny's vault had chains and locks on it, and he talked about how he'd never spent $1 that he'd ever earned and whatever. But in fact, Jack Benny was immensely generous. And he gave gifts to his friends. He gave gifts to everybody. He gave all kinds of money to charity. But one of the most incredible stories about Jack Benny is about his romance with his wife. And there was a woman by the name of Sadie Marks. She later became Mary Livingston and was on his show. That was her stage name, and there she is. And when she was working in the studio, he started sending her a red rose every single day. Eventually, she figured out who it was that was sending the red rose. They eventually got married. She figured the red rose every day was going to stop, and those red roses just kept on coming. They got married in 1927. He died in 1974, and every single day for 47 years of marriage, plus their courtship, she received a red rose every single day. Then he died in 1974, and she was widowed, and the rose came the next day, and the next, and the next, and after a week she phoned the florist and said, Mr. Benny has passed away, you don't need to be sending me the roses. And the florist said, well, actually I do. Mr. Benny has arranged and paid for that you will be receiving a red rose every day for the rest of your life. She died almost 10 years later, and in total, she received a red rose from Jack Benny almost every single day for almost 60 years. You know what, guys? That just makes us look bad. I don't know. I just don't know how else to express it. Then we just look bad, and there's not a thing you can do about it at this point. But that's the gift of giving, or the way of showing love, through the giving and the receiving of gifts. How do you show your love? How do you receive your love? Through words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service, physical touch, and the giving and the receiving of gifts. Jesus said this, to love one another just as he also first loved us.
Church of the Rock has services every Sunday at 1397 Buffalo Place, and we invite you to join us when you're in the Winnipeg area. If you'd like a booklet to help you understand more about God's gift of forgiveness and reconciliation through Jesus Christ, please contact us, and we'd be happy to send you a free copy of the Book of Hope. Visit our website at www.churchoftherock.ca. Thank you for watching, and God bless you.